Wolves. The very word sends a shiver of excitement down your spine, doesn't it? Anybody who has followed the conservation literature about the possibility of wolves being reintroduced into Britain will have heard, no doubt, about Alladale Wilderness Reserve in the Scottish Highlands, the owner of which is keen to see wolves reintroduced there. They talk about it being a wolf-controlled experimental release. Well, Alladale Wilderness Reserve is involved in plenty of other conservation projects, whilst it seems, in actual fact, that the wolf project is currently on hold. But Alladale is involved in deer management, in Scottish wildcat captive breeding, in reforestation of the ancient Caledonian pine forest, habitat restoration, particularly of peatlands, and many other projects as well. I talked to the reserve manager of Alladale Wilderness Reserve, and I began by asking him what his job involves.
Everything to do with the reserve, really, with the land. So my role at Alladale is to look after the 23,500 acres that we have. So deer culling, tree planting, overseeing builds, repairs to roads, firewood for lodges, checking fences. A big part of what we're about is tourism, so we also take guests out onto the reserve.
Ines, can the job be divided up into annual, seasonal, monthly, weekly duties?
Some of them can, yeah. So the tourist side is 9 months a year. We obviously have to carry out a deer cull here to manage the land. So that is kind of seasonal, but we've adopted different types of management in different areas now. So we've got enclosures, so we have to manage the deer out of season as well. The maintenance is whenever you can get at it, really.
Does Alladale have a reserve management plan? And if it does, what are its goals?
Okay, so we do have various plans in place. The main goal here is habitat restoration or nature recovery. Our approach to doing that is using hospitality to help subsidize that. And we're fortunate that the owner makes up the difference, with any, surplus costs in any projects. We want to prove that a Highland reserve or estate can be sustainable and create employment.
It is. In nature conservation today, rewilding is a term that's used often. What does it mean to you?
Excuse me. Well, it's a term I don't use. It's a term that could be relevant to some of the work that we do at Alladale. For me, it means restoration of the land, bringing back species that are missing from the landscape. I find that it's quite an emotive term. I prefer using nature recovery or habitat restoration. Implies that we're redoing something, and for me, we're just moving forward. So even wilding would be a better term, but that is just a personal view on it.
What word would you use differently? Wilding?
I just don't like rewilding. It's, we're not, and it maybe I'm misinterpreting what it means, but I'm not turning back the clock of 500 years ago when this country was heavily forested and had, various wildlife. I think we've just got to move on from where we are currently and improve from that moment going forward, really. We know we can't turn back the clock now. Are there lots of species missing in our environment? Of course there is. From, the beavers, very controversial. We know that they are great ecosystem engineers, but in places the habitat is simply not suited to them. we're part of the captive breeding of wildcat, Scottish wildcat, and we haven't even got the wildcats back into the wild yet and seen them on a sort of stable footing. So we're talking about lynx and wolves and stuff like that. And I think before we take that step, we've got to start at the bottom and work up.
What conservation projects is Alladale involved in? I mean, I've read about, the wolf project. Can you just update me, please?
The current owner acquired Alladale in 2003. Very quickly, implied that he wasn't into traditional field sports. He was into the environment, felt that there was lots of things missing, and in the absence of these missing things, there was a pile more work to be done with our physical management of the land. And he namely went on to wanting to bring back wolves and bears. The bears have been sidelined because we feel that the habitat in Scotland is just not suited. So the wolves have been a big part of the vision at Alladale. We're 23,500 acres, and we really feel that we could do an experiment over a 50,000 acre enclosed area. We've never shouted about reintroduction of wolves to Scotland because we really don't think it's viable. There's 5.5 million people in a small country with, I don't know, probably that and then some in sheep. So we're not ready for reintroduction of wolves. So we've always referred to it as a controlled release. So creating something like a 50,000 acre enclosure in the Highlands somewhere. Doesn't need to be Alladale, but of course, Alladale's the one that's made the noise about it. So yeah, if we could, convince neighbours that it was the right thing to do, that was always the goal. So the vision is always there, but the day-to-day projects, we clearly don't have wolves here. So what we've done is we've become part of the Scottish Wildcat Captive Breeding Programme in association with the Royal Zoological Society for Scotland. So we're kind of an outpost, a breeding post for them. In 2013, we brought back 36 red squirrels with Roy Dennis and did a bit of collaboration. The owner funded the project through the European Nature Trust, and we did all the physical work. We did a bit of collaboration with the neighbours, released the squirrels, which had been absent from this part of the Highlands for guesses 50 to 60 years. Loss of habitat, probably a bit of predation, stuff like that. And it's been a complete success. The squirrels have spread far and wide. They are very adaptable. We've had some experiments with some of the bigger animals. Wild boar, we did an experiment with them just to with Oxford University's Wild Crew. So that was a kind of impacts on the vegetation and the boar's behaviour and a huge enclosure. So we removed them about 2013. The project was over, and we found that this habitat it's so poor, the soil quality, that without us supplementary feeding the wild boar, they weren't happy here. They would have starved through the winter. So that was one of the findings that we found. We've planted just short of 1 million native trees. We've done a peatland restoration project, and we're looking to do some more peatland restoration, trying to create employment and keep the whole thing running. I mean, we've been doing an outreach program with local schools for the last 12 or 13 years, and probably had almost 2,000, school children within a 50-mile catchment come to the reserve, and just, reconnecting them with the land a wee bit, getting them planting some trees, doing some peat surveys, getting to go gorge scrambling, a bit of personal development. It's wild camping for 4 nights. So all of these projects are really important. I think, we've got to engage with the local community. And the nice thing about the guy that owns Alladale, he doesn't say he owns it. He's a custodian. So he's looking after it. And I think that's important. The hills are for all of us. The glens are for all of us, we just got to look after it and be respectful that there's activities that go on in this landscape to help look after it at certain times of the year, and just work together, really,
What are the skills, licenses, and personal qualities that have been key to your professional success as a reserve manager?
Wow. This is a good one. Oh God, how do I answer this? A lot of my family members have been, professional deer stalkers over the years. And I've been very fortunate that I got the opportunities to go out deer culling at quite a young age. Really enjoyed it and made a career out of it, because that's a big part of what we do here is deer management. We should be a bit more respectful of the deer. They're the success story here. They've gone from being a forest animal to living in the open range, which has a pretty challenging climate with equally challenging vegetation for them to survive on. Red deer were a forest animal and do much better in forested habitats. And for me, that's what I want to see in the future. All these trees that we're planting, creating all this, better vegetation for the deer. It's improving the habitat that will equally in turn improve the quality of the deer. The qualities you've got to have is you've got to be respectful of the deer. We're culling very heavy here now, and all of our neighbours know that, and probably a lot of people in the deer world know that. But we've been on a reduction cull here for a long time. And what I can say is that, the health and quality of the deer here, the weights haven't gone to twice the size, because I think genetically they can't, but the survival rate has improved. We get way less mortality than we had before. I hate saying this. I know personally now that with the way the habitat is responding currently, we have historically, at Alladale certainly, hang on to an unnaturally high density of deer. I never blame the deer for Scotland looking the way it does. I blame my ancestors for that. Unfortunately, the deer, they've got to live as well, and they browse a lot of saplings in the winter, and they're just doing what they should be doing. But I'm very lucky. I've got a young team with me. We're not trying to shoot all the deer. We do call it culling, culling, not killing, although some people might look at it as being killing. We are trying to maintain a healthy, leave the best on the land, but I've got to be completely open and honest here that is not always possible. We can all say as much as we like that we're killing out the weak and the poor, but when you're doing a reduction cull, you can't be that discriminant. And we've had to shoot good animals, but yeah, it's just a big challenge. I think you just got to enjoy what you're doing, and just be mindful and respectful of the deer, really.
Please, can you describe your career from the beginning to today?
I started at Alladale in December 1991 with my cousin after his father passed away. He had been on the property for 30 years. March 1992 was offered a YTS position here, which involved 2 years on and off going to Thurso College and working for an absentee family that had Alladale for approximately 20 years. And we're very much a traditional sporting tenant that enjoyed shooting, fishing, and walking. And God, without knowing it, probably had the 7-year itch, and ended up doing a couple of, probably about 5 or 6 years counting deer with the Deer Commission through January till May. and then coming back to Alladale and doing the sort of culling part of the season, you know, with the tourists, because that's when we were busiest back then. I've also, for my sins, been part of a deer cull on the Isle of Ram back in 2002 and 3, I think it was. So we helped, myself and a colleague helped do the culling out there for 2 seasons, just short blocks. And the current owner took on Alladale in 2003. Said he didn't want me on a part-time basis anymore. He wanted me full-time. And here I still am. He very quickly told me that he didn't value Alladale on, you know, how many deer he could kill. He valued Alladale on the condition of the habitat. And I'm thinking to myself back in 2003 that, well, no one else is doing that. Everyone else values it on, you know, the land part, on how many stags you can stalk and how many fish you can catch and how many brace of grouse you can shoot. And he said, no, I value it on the habitat. Start reducing the deer population. And he gave me numbers to cull and set targets that weren't targets that meant anything. They were just numbers. And anyway, we reached these targets, and the targets, sometimes the goalposts moved from time to time. And, you know, we've developed a respect of each other now. And I think the owner has confidence in what I do with the team here. And, you know, ultimately, when I started here in 91, there was probably, you know, a population of maybe 2,000 to 2,500 deer, maybe more on certain occasions. And now there's approximately 550. And this year, I'm not a tree hugger, and I never thought I'd get excited about seeing how the vegetation's starting to respond at altitude. But it is, and I'm like, yeah, we're getting so close to where we need to be. And now 19 years with Paul, done lots of projects with him, traveled all over the world, looked at lots of areas with wolves. Now way less concerned about bringing wolves back to Scotland. It's like, you know, if it does or doesn't happen, let's watch this space. But wolves are more afraid of us than we are of them. You know, I'm not an ecologist. I don't have any letters after my name. I'm not embarrassed by that. But I think I understand some of the processes that have been happening on the landscape here and how we can improve them. And, you know, it just requires lots of intervention, to be honest.
Innes, what's your view of nature conservation or habitat management today?
We're tending to take sides, you know, you're either traditional field sports or you're into conservation. And I think we can have both. I think if we start communicating better, be respectful of each other, who doesn't want to look after Scotland?
Innes, how do you see nature conservation and or habitat management changing over the next 10 years?
Personally speaking, I think that the government are probably going to get more power and will probably start to, maybe in the next 10 years, use a heavier hand in how we reach some of these goals, because we all know that Scotland set itself hugely ambitious targets for nature recovery and, you know, the carbon sequestration thing. So I think there'll still be grouse shooting, there'll still be deer stalking. It won't be in the capacity it is currently, that's for sure. And we've got to deal with that and adapt.
What books, people, or meetings have most influenced your thinking?
We had a South African vet here. He was from a conservation project in South Africa. And he actually came out with me. And at that point, we were still doing commercial deer stalking. And I took him out and he shot a stag, and he couldn't believe the skills required to get that stag. And he said, "Can I give you some advice?" you're at the beginning of something pretty special here. You've got the skills to take elsewhere. But he said, don't leave it now. Try and embrace it and see where this takes you.
What skills, Innes, was the South African vet referring to regarding your deer stalking?
Any city-dwelling person that doesn't understand the countryside should, if given an opportunity, spend a day with a deer stalker in the Highlands, because the craft of navigating the wind, using the land to your advantage, stalkers, they're studying the deer, and it's, the deer don't know they're there. They're very, very mindful and respectful people, and
can you tell us a little bit more, Innes, about the Wildcat project? How's that going? What are its goals?
Bar this year, the previous 3 years, we had bred successfully, and what we're doing is we're basically trying to strengthen genetics. So having the best cats possible in captivity. We have no control over where our cats go or which ones we receive. That's all part of the stud book holder, which is RZSS. But we've got a great relationship with them, Kincraig Wildlife Park, that they are breeding cats at the moment, of which one of our females is within that program. So she'll be a mother of some of the future cats going out into the wild. They hopefully will be releasing cats this time or before this time next year. I'm not sure what the timings are exactly, but certainly next year into the Cairngorm National Park. I believe the term is that they're basically functionally extinct in the wild. There are so few of them. If we can breed some cats up, get cats back into the wild, that's what we all want to see.
Innes, what advice can you offer somebody who wants to be either a land manager or who wants to work with wildcats?
Embrace change. It should be deer and land management, because we're talking about tree planting, more native woodland. It's going to be suited for black grouse in the future, red squirrels in the future, and the deer in the future. We're talking about peatland restoration. The peatland restoration is going to be sucking in carbon, giving us all clean air to breathe if we selfishly just think about ourselves. But what's it going to do for the wildlife, the dragonflies and invertebrates that are going to be in all these bogs? So it's a whole land management thing now.
When you say change is coming, Innes, do you mean like gamekeeping or deer stalking is almost the dying industry, or what? Sorry.
The grouse moors, for example, are going to have more legislation put on them. I think even if you want to buy a chunk of land in Scotland in the future, it won't be about how big your wallet is. It'll be, what are you going to do with that piece of land? What are you going to do? Community engagement, outreach programs. Are you going to do some restoration work? So, yeah, you're asking me about change, and you probably know more about the change than I do, but, I get snippets of this. So, we've just got to be open to it,
Innes, is there anything you'd like to add?
We've just got to look after it and communicate better and be respectful. It doesn't matter if you work for Nature Scot or you work for Forest and Land Scotland or the RSPB or a private estate or a wilderness reserve. Just respect each other. We're all paid to do different jobs, but we're all chasing the same thing, Environmentally, it's all the talk at the moment, and let's be honest, we're not talking about climate change. We're talking about climate emergency. So how we tackle that, we've got an ideal opportunity in some of these private estates, and what I'd say is, I'm not talking about getting rid of the grouse moor. I'm saying, if there's an area in the grouse moor that might be suited to more tree planting, why not do some more tree planting? If it's going to slow the water runoff down into the local village, let's just be open to this. Let's stop taking sides. We can't all be in denial that the deer population has done that. There's however many million red, rose, sika, fallow, whatever else species of deer, Chinese water deer, muntjac, within the British Isles. We can't ignore it anymore. I see it even coming to work. I travel 28 miles to get to work every day, and the amount of deer collisions I'm starting to see on the roadside now, there's definitely way more deer about, you know. We can't ignore the crop damage, and that crop might be to grow barley or potatoes, or it might be to grow trees. Ultimately, trees make trees, and all we're doing at Alladale is putting a seed source back in the land.
How many red deer, what's the size of the overpopulation, the excess that needs culling?
Do you want someone to come and shoot me, do you? There's too many deer in certain parts of Scotland. So not the whole of Scotland has too many deer. We've got to look at where these problem areas are and try and address it. I think the step change now is that, you know, for the last however many years, we've been talking about target density of deer. So how many deer per square kilometre, blah, blah, blah. Now we're looking at herbivore impact assessments. So let's look at what the land is telling us. We've got to look at the herbivore impact assessments and let that message tell us how many deer we think should be in certain places, and just, you know, just work together. That's it.
Innes, it's been absolutely fascinating. I could talk to you all the year round. Innes McNeil, Reserve Manager at Alladale Wilderness Reserve. Thank you very much for being on The Practical Animal.
You're welcome.